Welcome to the Librarian's Lost Chapters. Tonight, we're traveling far back in time past, the echoes of sandals on stone, beyond the gleaming statues and dusty scrolls into the layered, bustling, and sometimes weary world of ancient Rome. You might imagine the Roman Empire is full of roaring crowds, fierce gladiators, and mighty emperors. But tonight's journey will take us elsewhere, to the quieter corners, to the worn sandals of the common people, to the rhythmic, repetitive lives of those who rarely made the history books, and to the damp, echoing chambers where water whispered through stone. In this episode, we begin not in a palace, but in the baths, and not just any baths, the Roman thermae, where steam and sweat mingled with gossip and grime. From there, we'll wander through the life of a curious young emperor Elagabalus, whose name history remembers, but whose story is softer and more complex than you may expect. We'll explore forgotten aqueduct tunnels, where water once flowed miles across a dry empire, and then we will end our journey in a very different kind of chamber where the elite dined under torchlight, while servants moved silently across mosaic floors. So find a comfortable position, let the world fall away, and imagine yourself stepping barefoot onto the smooth, wet floor of a Roman bathhouse. Why you wouldn't last a day in a Roman bathhouse? Imagine the early light just beginning to warm the narrow streets of the city. You're already sweating, not from exertion but from anticipation. Because today, you'll go into the baths. It sounds like a luxury, perhaps even relaxing, but the Roman bathhouse was far from the tranquil spa you might picture. It was crowded, noisy, and complex. There was a rhythm to it, and if you didn't know that rhythm, it could be overwhelming. You arrive at the entrance to the thermae, clutching your small fian as a low-denomination coin. Already, others are crowding around. The baths are for the public. All classes, all men sometimes, even women on alternating days sharing. Water, heat, space, and sound. Inside, the air is thick and humid. Steam clings to your skin. The floor is slick with water and scattered sand. The walls echo with voices, dozens, sometimes hundreds, laughing, murmuring, arguing in Latin and Greek. The process begins in the apoditerium, the changing room. Here there are no private lockers. If you're lucky, you've brought a slave to guard your clothes. If not, you may lose your sandals. From here, you shuffle barefoot and exposed into the tepidarium, the warm room, a space of transition. The air is thick and still, gently heated from beneath the floor by the hypocaust, a clever Roman innovation. You sit on a stone bench. It's warm to the touch, and so is the wall behind your back. Eventually, you make your way to the caldarium, the hot room. It's the steamiest place in the entire complex. You breathe slowly. The scent is a mix of oil, sweat, and the faint aroma of herbs. Everyone around you glistens. The stone underfoot is nearly too hot to walk on. Here a slave might rub you down with olive oil, thick and fragrant. Then, with a curved metal tool called a strigil, they scrape it off. Along with it, sweat, dirt, and dead skin. The process is neither gentle nor quiet. It's noisy, functional, and oddly public. The bath itself is not a long soak. You might plunge briefly into a pool of hot water, then another of cold. There is no soap, no towels, just oil, water, and scraping. You might be jostled, splashed. You might overhear rumors of politics or gladiator. You might be bumped by a merchant, a retired soldier, or a senator's bodyguard. After all this, you reach the frigidarium, the cold room. It's a shock to the system, a plunge into a cold bath that leaves your skin tingling. Roman medicine believed in the balancing of humors, hot and cold, dry and wet. The frigidarium was the final punctuation of your cleansing. And then if you haven't slipped, shouted, or lost your sandals, you emerge, tired, flushed, scraped clean, drenched in humidity, perhaps a bit dizzy, maybe slightly more relaxed, but certainly not refreshed in the modern sense. Now imagine doing this 3 or 4 times a week. The Roman bathhouse was not a spa. It was a social engine, a furnace of bodies and breath, a place where cleanliness met chaos, where ritual met routine. And for you, a stranger in time, it would likely be overwhelming and unforgettable. Let's take a breath and step out of the steam now. Because while the bathhouses welcomed the people, the palaces above them echoed with a very different kind of noise. Let us now turn to the curious case of an emperor, a boy who walked in golden sandals and burned incense in places it didn't belong. Let us leave behind the heat and stone of the baths and drift upward to the marbled corridors of imperial Rome. The footsteps here are fewer, the voices more hushed. Yet behind every heavy curtain, whispers carry scandal, reverence, confusion. They all orbit one boy. He was born Sextus Varius Avitus Bassianus in the distant province of Syria, and though the imperial purple would eventually hang from his shoulders, it would do so awkwardly too large, too heavy, never quite fitting the boy beneath it. Before he was a Roman emperor, he was a priest, not of Jupiter or Mars or any of the gods you might recognize. He worshipped a deity from his homelander. His priesthood, cloaked in silks and incense, was rich with symbolism and ritual, performed on high altars under the open sky of Emesa. And then, almost suddenly, the boy was in Rome, not because he sought it, but because others did. His mother and grandmother, clever and calculating, pushed for a return to power after the murder of the Emperor Calla. They claimed that Elagabalus was the rightful heir, that he had Caracalla's blood. Whether it was true hardly mattered. With the backing of Eastern legions, he marched west, and Rome, exhausted and confused, accepted him. At just 14 years old, Elagabalus became emperor. You might expect stories of conquests, speeches, reforms. Instead, we find confusion, extravagance, rumors. They say he filled fountains with perfume instead of water, that his banquets were layered with flower petals so deep guests were buried, that he elevated his sun god above Jupiter, even placing the sacred black stone of Elagabal in Rome's most honored temples. To the Senate, it was bewildering. To the people, perhaps amusing. But to the traditional Roman elite, it was sacrilege. He wore fine silks instead of military armor. He spent hours preparing elaborate rituals, bringing Eastern ceremony into Western halls. He seemed uninterested in conquest, governance, or the Senate. Instead, he favored dancers, singers, mystics. He redefined what power looked like until Rome itself recoiled. Some historians whisper of gender play, that Elagabalus rejected titles, experimented with roles, and may have sought surgical transformation. It's difficult to say with certainty. The sources are few, and many are hostile. Roman chroniclers were not kind to emperors they considered un-Roman. But what emerges through the fog is a portrait not of madness, but of dissonance. A boy raised in one world, placed suddenly in another, one bound to ritual, mystery, and incense, and dropped into a city that expected command, order, and war. He ruled for only 4 years. In 222 CE, at the age of 18, he was quietly assassinated, perhaps by soldiers loyal to his own grandmother, who had grown tired of the experiment. His body was thrown into the Tiber River. His name was removed from monuments, his god forgotten. But time has a gentle way of softening the sharpness of judgment. Today, some see in Elagabalus a figure of misunderstood identity, a symbol of resistance, of contradiction, of ritual in a world that preferred rule. In the end, he remains elusive, like perfume on warm marble present, but impossible to hold. Now, let's leave the palace behind. Let's step away from silken sandals and turn instead to something slower, heavier, older. Beneath your feet, beneath the streets of ancient Rome, something flows. Quietly, always. Let's descend into the stonework and wonder of the Roman aqueducts. Close your eyes now, and imagine yourself standing at the edge of the Roman countryside. The sun is soft. The breeze carries the scent of wild herbs and distant stone. And above, you arching across the land like a spine of pale ribs, runs an aqueduct. To the Romans, water was not just necessity, it was majesty. Cities flowed with it. Fountains splashed in courtyards, bathhouses hummed with steam, gardens flourished, even in arid regions. But none of it was possible without the slow, steady work of their aqueducts. They stretched for miles, some over 50, even 60 miles in length. And yet, they flowed without pumps. No machines, no magic, just gravity. A slow, constant trickle engineered with astonishing precision. Take the Aqua Claudia, for example, begun under Emperor Caligula and completed under Claudius. It carried water nearly 45 miles from the Anio Nova spring, through valleys and ridges, to Rome's thirsty center. Its arches still stand in fragments today, overgrown and half forgotten, weathered by time. Beneath the city, the aqueducts became tunnels, hidden, dark, and damp. Few ever saw them. Fewer still understood how they worked, and yet they carried millions of gallons daily through stone-lined channels, measured by incline to a fraction of a degree. Some aqueducts were elevated, walking across the land on grand, graceful arches. Others were buried, weaving like veins beneath villas and forums. Engineers used lead, terracotta, and concrete to guide the flow. Maintenance workers would descend into these shadowy spaces to clear blockages, remove sediment, or patch leaks. Their job was tedious, and often thankless. The rhythm of it all was slow and measured. Water trickling through tunnels, echoing against stone, the occasional drop, a splashy silence, then movement again. Over time, Rome built 11 major aqueducts. Together, they provided enough water for over 1 million people, a feat unmatched. Until modern cities rose centuries later, but the aqueducts weren't just plumbing. They were status. Wealthy Romans could petition to have water lines diverted to their private homes. Temples claimed sacred springs. Entire legal offices existed to settle disputes over flow rights. The politics of water were slow but ever-present. And what became of them? After Rome fell, the aqueducts fell silent too. Vandals damaged them. Earthquakes shook them. Trees grew in the cracks. For centuries, they were forgotten until farmers stumbled on tunnels beneath their fields, or shepherds rested in their shade. Today, some sections are still visible, moss-covered silent, birds nest between their stones, rain seeps down their ancient paths, and under certain Roman roads, the faint sound of trickling water still echoes in the darkness, unheard by most. There is something deeply soothing about them. The patience, the purpose, the precision, they remind us that greatness can be quiet. That power can flow not in roars, but in whispers. That empires are not only built by soldiers, but by stones, slopes, and water. Let's leave the tunnels now. Let the trickle fade behind us, because our final journey this evening is a very different kind of flow. Let's ascend once more, this time to the courtyards of the Roman elite, where oil lamps flicker, dishes are passed in silence, and the rhythm of dining becomes a ceremony all its own. The sun has long since dipped below the tiled rooftops. A hush has settled over the courtyards, and in the wealthiest corners of the city, another kind of ritual is beginning. The Roman dinner party, a convivium. You do not sit at a table. Instead, you recline half-lounging on a low couch, supported by pillows, your left elbow propped so your right hand remains free to eat. You're not alone. Each couch holds 3 guests, arranged according to status. You, if lucky, are the least of the 3. Before you lies a low table made of marble or carved wood. It bears fruit, olives, small fish, bread, and bowls of rich sauces. But this is only the beginning. The meal, like the empire itself, unfolds, slowly deliberate, decadent, and layered. Servants move about in silence, barely noticed. One pours wine watered down, as is custom, into silver cups. Another gently waves a fan. A third carries a towel scented with rosewater, in case your fingers need refreshing. The air is thick with aromas. Roasted duck, honeyed dates, spiced lentils, fresh thyme. Somewhere in the corner, a small fountain murmurs softly. The conversation is measured, not rushed. A philosopher might speak of virtue, a senator of distant campaign. A poet recites a few lines, met with polite nods. Stories drift between bites. There is no shouting, no laughter that rises too loud. That would be poor form. The meal comes in 3 acts: degustatio, the prima mensa, and the secunda mensa. Between each, time passes, dishes are changed, bowls are cleared, and the rhythm of the evening slows. Occasionally, a performer enters, a player, perhaps, or a dancer with quiet footsteps and painted eyes. They do not command attention, they merely accompany the evening, like background music to conversation. Outside the walls of the villa, Rome remains busy. Fires burn in clay stoves. Street vendors call out final offerings. But inside, the world narrows to cushions, flickering lamplight, and the slow shifting of flavors on the tongue. For the host, the dinner party is more than food. It is a performance of status. Each dish signals wealth. Each guest reflects connections. Even the plate you eat from may be imported from Alexandria, or made of fine red slip ceramic from Gaul. There are no clocks here. The evening ends when the host decides, perhaps with candied fruits, or another round of wine, or simply the quiet fading of conversation. Eventually, you rise, stiff from reclining, your back a little sore, your belly full. A servant brings sandals, another offers a parting towel, and as you step into the cool night air, The distant hum of the city greets you. The stars above are unchanged. But for a few hours, you've lived a life of quiet luxury, so very different from the heat of the bath or the darkness of the aqueduct tunnel. This, too, was Rome. And now, we return to the present. You've walked the steamy corridors of a Roman bathhouse, scraped clean beneath the gaze of strangers. You've glimpsed the strange, perfumed world of an emperor whose reign was brief, but whose mystery lingers. You've listened to the steady whisper of water beneath stone, and you've reclined among silks and spices, under the soft glow of oil lamps. History is often loud in the telling, but in truth, most of it was quiet, repetitive, grounded in routines and rituals. In footsteps worn into stone, in water flowing unnoticed, in meals shared under soft lamplight, may the rhythm of those ancient lives, their patterns, their silences, guide you gently into rest. Thank you for joining me on this journey through time. Sleep well, and until next time, good night.